Hi everybody, it's Richard Muirhead back again, co-founder and managing partner at Fabric Ventures, and we're here in the middle of sunny Hyde Park for the Fabric Summit 2025 edition. And I'm actually very, very thrilled to be joined by someone who I would count as a little bit more than an acquaintance, slightly less than a good friend, Mike Hearn, who's been working in the field of distributed systems, software development, and indeed Bitcoin for as long as it's pretty much been around. So I'm going to let him do a little introduction himself. He's, I guess, a kind of a software developer at large, I would say, currently.
Right.
Mike, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah, I mean, what to say? I don't do Bitcoin anymore, actually. That was in the past. But since then, I've had a long-term interest, even after that, in decentralized systems and what you can do with them and what you can't do with them. And like everyone in software, I'm now wrestling with AI and what that means and what you can do with that and what you can't do with that also. And I have my own company, but I also have a research role at a tech firm, but I'm not representing them today, so I'll leave that to one side. So
excellent. Look, so what I thought we'd start with is maybe just thinking about some of the original use cases that you were quite, forward-thinking in identifying more than a decade ago, or thereabouts at least, that are kind of at the intersection of AI and should we call them digital assets?
Self-owning cars and things.
Yeah, just to unpack that, clearly you had some motivations or sort of around that, as in, or it got you interested at least.
Well,
where have you gone since then?
Right, so I think what you're talking about is I gave a talk in 2014 or 15, I forget which, where I speculated on what happens if you take a AI of some kind, back then classical AI, doesn't have to be deep learning, and give it a cryptocurrency wallet and say, go off and earn money, survive. Like, can you actually do that, right? Can you have a robot that, if you can earn your own money, that's what makes you an independent person, in effect, right? That's the barrier between you're no longer a kid, you're now an adult, is that you move out of house and you can pay for your own rent and so on. And so it was fun to speculate about what that would look like, and I chose self-driving cars as a sort of sci-fi. It was meant to just be an entertaining talk. Example of these robots, and speculated, you could see like waves of self-driving cars migrating from city to city looking for work, or if they ran out of money, they would like park and die because they can't afford to recharge themselves. And they could even, and I was speculating about how you would train the software. You could imagine a sort of genetic approach where they actually like split into children, and when a new car is manufactured, the parents like buy a child and then upload their brain into it, and it goes off and develops independent strategy. You can go all directions with this kind of thing. At the time, it seemed like that would never happen. It was just fun sci-fi, and here we are 10 years later, and you could definitely do that. That is absolutely within the realm of what we can now build.
Does it feel that's quicker than you expected to be?
Yes, because I thought it would never happen. So anything faster than never is fast.
It's pretty fast.
Yeah, but of course the question back then and still today is, would anyone actually do that? And if so, why would they do that? Who would they be held responsible for it?
Maybe another question is, will it be down to one person or one organization deciding to do it? There's a kind of frenzy of different models evolving, business models, foundational, and different technologies. And again, we've had agents on the internet with X accounts and Bitcoin wallets and choosing to speculate and generate more money. We've had that. We have now, courtesy of Alex Kendall and the team at Wave out of Cambridge, with a specialized AI for driving that can cope with a generalized driving use case, which are all, I would say, is kind of piece parts of the end vision that you described, but none of them, of course, controlled by any one entity, or any entity, possibly.
Right.
So, I mean, this feels like this is going to evolve naturally, and it's going to combine.
It might, yeah. I mean, I used cars as an example back then, but these days, I think this won't really happen until you have humanoid robots, which is very close. Right? You can watch, you can see humanoid robots in the lab right now, and they're as agile as people, and they can stand and walk, and their battery life lasts a long time. Because these units are something that individuals could buy. If an individual cannot really set up a self-driving car AI. That's like, they're not commodified tech. So So you couldn't get a Satoshi of autonomous robots with their own money, right? But if you talk about humanoid robots, you can buy those from China, within a budget that's actually affordable by individuals if they're well off. Not most people, but a few people could do that. And then you can upload your agent to it, give it some money, and then of course it can go off, and if it has a way to transact in the real world. Back then, I was sort of more optimistic about that. These days, if you have a cryptocurrency wallet, you can't just walk out onto the street here in Hyde Park and use it necessarily. But if you have stable coins or similar, then maybe
that's happening pretty fast.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because you introduced a concept which is, to some degree, is actually manifested in our portfolio company, Frodobots, and elsewhere, which is that you can bring humans to be involved in the training of these systems, in the funding of these systems. But that kind of it's sort of setting the starting parameters of the environment, and then but from then, kind of what I was getting at is that you're almost defining an organic system which has its own set of interactions that's going to evolve beyond the control of any one organization. And maybe we're not quite there yet because there's still constraints around power consumption. There are still...
It's still a sci-fi concept.
It's
much less of one than it once was, yeah.
So I actually had a disagreement of a very minor variety with my brother the other day because we were talking about football. He's very strong in the sports arena. He was saying it's not going to be the case you're ever going to replace a football team and the passion that exists for kind of Chelsea and the players within it with robots or software. I'm not sure that I definitely agree. Maybe not entirely, because we still want that relationship with people. But as you said, humanoid robots are getting to the point where they have an agility.
I mean, you could probably make a match happen with robots, but maybe I'm on your brother's side there. I find it hard to imagine people getting so passionate about it when there's no stories behind it.
Maybe it's a different sport. I mean, it doesn't have the same wife and girlfriend aspect to it,
right,
which is maybe the extension of that human character that we're talking about. Right. But it also, it's a different thing, akin to, I think there's a sort of sport, or I don't know if it's a sport or a competition or a TV show, kind of robot wars. But you can imagine.
Yeah, you can imagine this sort of thing happening. Yeah, absolutely.
Droid football of some description.
I think the interesting thing here is that for a lot of people, I think something like ChatGPT came out of nowhere, right? Just one day there was no talking machines, and the next day suddenly there is, and they're at a human level and they know everything and so on. And it seemed to come out of nowhere, even though that was actually a very long-term research program. With humanoid robots, it's probably going to be the same. Right? One day people will wake up and there's going to be humanoid robots walking around, and they can talk to you and pick things up and open doors and do all these things that were once sci-fi, and it will feel like it happened just like that.
Yeah.
Even though,
it's been cooking for a while.
It's been cooking for a while. And so the question then will become, all the conversations that are now being had around AI and how that changes everything will start all over again, and people will be asking, well, humanoid robots, how does that change everything? Right? What does that mean for all these jobs that were thought to be safe, and now suddenly they're within the realm of what AI can also do? And no one's really having that conversation yet, as far as I see.
Well, I don't think anybody's really coped with the first conversation, which is
the first conversation
call centers, internships, analysts,
software developers.
That was still kind of barely internalized as a concept, but indeed suddenly humanoid robots.
We're not going to be anywhere near finished with that. Right? The humanoid robot's probably a few years out at most, I would say. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so one of my favorite tropes on this, which is that you should never think about this. You can never comprehensively contemplate it from the kind of current paradigm, by which I mean, just classically, in the first few examples of cars being manufactured with internal combustion engines, they were the carriage or the horse and carriage with a kind of engine strapped onto it.
Right.
And it was way short of what was required to make that effective. And if you judged it by that, you would have said it's kind of noisy, and I kind of need to refuel it, and it vibrates horribly, and whatever. And and then we go too fast, and then I can't cope with bumps and whatever. It was a whole disaster. But when you rebuilt the entire system and engineered the vehicle around it, of course, and then of course extended it to electric engines, you got an entirely different thing. So I think that's a big jump that we started.
I think that's going to absolutely happen. A lot of stuff is going to be rebuilt around the needs and limitations of AI and robots, because that will work out to be the most effective way to. So you see it happening already, right? Already people are planning on how do we make websites more digestible by LLMs?
Yeah,
that's a standard that's just getting started now, because they don't want or need all of the pictures and things usually, right? They don't need an attractive thing. They just need the content.
You see it, is one casually, queries ChatGPT on something, whether it's help me plan my holiday. Actually, I saw a sort of bizarre little behavior. I think it would be accurate to say where you'd have ChatGPT would kind of find a website that was like an archaic one that had really bad photography actually, but there was a bunch of text that it kind of liked, and then it would come back and it would recommend this place. But if you looked at it through a human lens, you get a totally different thing. See, indeed, there are different requirements and limitations, and it's going to be absolutely, there are going to be many more queries that are from those agents than there are from humans. Yeah, and I think the primary way people will have to change the way they think about this is what I've been seeing when I've been talking to people, including software developers, by the way, about AI. There's a lot of people who just don't want to know. They're just it's hype. I don't want to know. Don't talk to me about this. But a lot of people think of it only in terms of chatbots. Right? They think it must be a human talking to an AI, and they're not thinking in terms of APIs and driving these things at scale. So they. I've suggested ideas like, why don't we have an AI review every single email sent inside an organization as it's being sent, right? And people are like, you can do that? I'm like, yes, of course you can do that. But it's not obvious. Yeah. And I made a prototype just a week or so ago where you can point it at a website and out pops a full-blown presentation with a speaker, and they click through slides, animated slide, and you just give it the documents and out pops a nice presentation. Yeah. And again, all this stuff seems obvious that you can do this, but it wasn't. I found it was not obvious to everybody, and they were like, whoa, mind blown. Exactly right. And we may come into it later, I think, on some of the panels and stuff during the kind of program today. But the whole security, day zero bugs, the fact that obviously with everything from social engineering to just looking for every single possible point of exploitation on the attack surface, all of that is looks very different now in this age of AI, and the arms race is going to ensue. And I saw actually someone, I think it was one of the chief information officers from Standard Chartered, talking about the use, kind of related to your point about email, but insider trading. Can we review every single email and every single conversation? Yeah, we can, and we can absolutely identify actually from that, whether or not a breach has occurred. So maybe if we finish, I have an endless appetite for having this conversation with you, and as I said to Ahmad, who I spoke to earlier, maybe we can return with an apple juice or a whiskey, whichever you like, and a real fire. What is going to happen next that is unexpected, is sudden? If we had, in your view, if we've had ChatGPT, we've got humanoid robots that are probably going to pop up soon, we can literally see those just over the horizon. Any thoughts on what's the next most unexpected sort of step?
Expect the unexpected? Well, that's a hard question.
I rely on you, Mike, to expect the unexpected.
I think what I'm expecting to see now, which is already happening, so I can't claim to be a prophet here, but a lot of people have not noticed it's happening, is the use of it in politics, where certain kinds of political parties come into power and they face massive resistance from the civil service. They struggle to control the institutions they're theoretically in charge of. But if you can deploy AI at scale, for example, to review every email, transcribe every video call, monitor every if you're worried about what people are teaching in the classroom, monitor every classroom at scale, right? Just put cameras and microphones in every single classroom, transcribe it all, run it all through LLMs. You can exert much greater grip over institutions, and you're starting to see Doge in the US have done a little bit of this, right? They'll be like, why don't we've got a problem with grants that go to organizations that aren't really using the grants properly or whatever. Why don't we just review all of them at scale at once, right? And we can identify every single grant recipient that we want to cancel in one go. I think people are barely aware this is happening even in the US, and when it starts to happen at scale, they're going to be really surprised at what you can do.
So what I'm going to take away from that observation is room, should we say at least, for transparency, avoiding too much concentration of power, both in terms of governance, but even just ownership of the technology, and something that feeds pretty directly into our whole thesis of openness and distributed compute and so forth. So I'll leave it with that. I'll take that
Did you
as being
expect
the insight. It was a goodie. I didn't expect that.
You did not
And we can
expect.
unpack
There
it.
we
It
go.
was
You did
good.
not expect
I
it.
did not expect your
All right.
unexpected expectation.
Yes.
There you go.
All right.
Thanks,
Good.
Mike. I really
No
appreciate
problem.
that.
Thank you. Thank you,
And
Richard.
thanks everybody for joining. Once again, Richard Muirhead, co-founder and managing partner at Fabric Ventures, here at the Fabric Summit 2025 in extremely sunny Hyde Park. We always guarantee sun for our visitors who come and join us. And thanks very much for joining us.